Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed the posters and saw some of the really amazing innovation that's happening across the state in both our academic institutions as well as our companies. This next session is going to look at something really special that Texas has that no other state has, the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. This now fully funded for the second go-round, $6 billion devoted to prevention, research, and commercialization of therapeutics and prevention programs in cancer really is unparalleled. There's no other state that has anything like it, and it has brought so many investigators to the state and launched a number of companies, as well as reached through the prevention programs thousands and thousands of lives and caught early cancers and changed trajectories of diseases. Moderating this panel will be Tom Kowalski, who's the president and CEO of the Texas Healthcare and Bioscience Institute of Austin, Texas. This group really is the advocacy group, making sure that our state policymakers and legislators are doing the best work possible to make it a state where scientific innovation can make it into the clinic. Mr. Kowalski previously was with Bill Clements and John Tower, as well as Congressman Jim Collins of Dallas, Texas. He was appointed in 1989 to the Board of Regents of the Texas State University System and served as chairman of that board in 1995. And so he will be introducing the panelists and talking about what impact CPRIT has had on our state in cancer research and prevention. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this particular panel that's going to be discussing about the most profound program, I think, that has ever hit the state of Texas, and certainly the life science industry in the state of Texas. And as you heard earlier today, obviously CPRIT is the second largest grant funding entity outside of the NIH in the United States. So it's a very, very exciting time for us. And the profound effect moving forward is going to be even that much stronger. So before we start, let me just ask, how many of you have heard about CPRIT? Raise your hands. I think we have, and we've got a panelist here. I think we have pretty much 90%, I think. How many of you have been touched by CPRIT, either through a grant? So we have quite a few. All right, here's the third question, and you don't have to raise your hand. How many of you voted for Proposition 6? Very, very good. You get a gold star. Thank you very much for doing that. You were one of 1.2 million people that voted yes on Prop 6, and it passed by 64%. And obviously the powerful programs within CPRIT, as you know, it attracts, creates, and expands research capabilities in higher ed. And I think some of the most important things about that is that there's been $977 million in direct follow-on funding to CPRIT academic grantees. And that's just one of the many exciting points. It attracts, creates, and expands the capabilities of private entities and creates high-quality paying jobs. You know, it's created 34 companies. It has been responsible for almost $2 billion in follow-on funding, and it's created over 10,000 permanent jobs. And so from an economic development standpoint, and this is not just in one region of the state, but it covers the entire state, it's been a phenomenal economic driver for the state of Texas. It expedites innovation and research and enhances the potential of breakthroughs in prevention and cures. And I think one of the most important things is getting patients to clinical trials. And a little unknown fact is that, you know, Texas, we trade off with New York and from time to time, but we rank third in clinical trials. Some years we'll be second in clinical trials. We're currently conducting about 21,000 clinical trials. CPRIT is a part of this. Obviously, California leads the way in clinical trials. And I think from a patient perspective, it's always important to know, and hopefully someday, that a patient can go to a clinical trial in their backyard versus going through the huge relocation cost to not only the patient but to the families in terms of taking those clinical trials. So it has created a number of clinical trials, and then of course there is the prevention side, which we're going to talk about here momentarily. So CPRIT has been tremendous. It was created originally in 2007. So we have been through, and I know today on the various panels you've heard about where we have been, where we were 10 years ago, forward-looking 10 years from now. And when CPRIT was created, the saying was, can you imagine where we will be in 10 years? And here we are in 2007. And you can see, and I know Jim Willson on the panel today will talk about some of the exciting numbers and the effect that it's had on the life science community. So we are in the process right now of moving forward, huge momentum for the life science industry. And I think there's an important question, and this is one that we had talked about during the campaign for CPRIT. And the question was, what if Prop 6 did not occur? And of course today, Prop 6 obviously did pass, and we have another 10 years in front of us, another $300 million a year. So with that, we have a wonderful panel. We are going to hear from each of our panelists. We've asked them to give us an overview of their institution, some of the projects that they're involved in, and then we will move into some Q&A with the panel, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions. So our first panelist, I'd like to introduce Dr. Keith Argenbright. He is the professor in the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center and Department of Clinical Sciences. One thing that he is known for, and that is bringing prevention, cancer prevention, and early detection services to rural Fort Worth areas and the surrounding counties. And one of the exciting things about Keith is he is the UT Regents Outstanding Teacher Award, which is the highest award given within the UT system. So Keith, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. I've got a unique role in that I am not only a faculty member at UT Southwestern in Dallas, but I also run a cancer institute in Fort Worth called the Moncrief Cancer Institute, which is a bit of a community cancer foundation, I would say. And it's been about 10 or 12 years, right about the time that CPRIT first started, when Moncrief decided to take on as one of its missions cancer prevention, not only in our community, but in communities outside of Fort Worth and really all throughout North Texas. And that's what we've been doing for the past 10 to 12 years. CPRIT is a critical piece in that. We have gotten over $15 million worth of funding for prevention services. I would dare to say, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I would dare to say that most people in this room have good insurance that pays for cancer prevention. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people, especially in rural communities, who don't have that same opportunity to get the cancer prevention services that are recommended and that are needed for them, and that's where we step in. And CPRIT has been critical for us to be able to take those funds and to offer those prevention services to the low-income, underinsured, and uninsured populations of North Texas. We take those CPRIT funds and we leverage those with both federal funding through the Center for Disease Control as well as local foundation funds. So it's not just that the money that we get from CPRIT goes to provide these services. It does, but the money that we get from CPRIT, we are able to leverage that with outside funding in order to stretch those dollars. You might say, well, look, this is all about research and this is all about commercialization, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, and what maybe some of the opportunities around the commercialization of cancer prevention could be. I just want to mention the obvious, that if you prevent cancer, then you don't have to go through the whole treatment milieu of cancer. And so I think that the people who originally started CPRIT back in the 2007, 2008, 2009 period of time were extremely wise in saying we're going to set aside 10% of the CPRIT dollars in order to focus on prevention, and that the other 90% is going to be on research and commercialization. Finally, just to let you know a little bit more about what we do in prevention, we look at those cancers in which there have been proven modalities that, when delivered, have been proven to reduce the incidence and reduce the mortality of cancer. So that would be mammograms for breast cancer, fecal immunochemical testing and colonoscopy for colorectal cancer, cervical pap smears for cervical cancer. Recently, we started doing low-dose CT scans for lung cancer, and I don't know if some of you might be aware of the fact that recently we had the largest one-year drop in mortality of cancer. That was just announced by the American Cancer Society, mainly because of the advances in the detection and treatment of lung cancer, and so that's something that we're very involved with. And then finally, the fastest growing cancer in Texas, which is hepatocellular cancer, we have a comprehensive screening program for that. So that's kind of an overview of the 10% of the CPRIT funds which are designated for prevention, and I'm sure we'll be talking about the other 90% for research and commercialization, and near the end maybe we can talk about some of the potential opportunities, commercialization and development opportunities in the prevention space.
You bet. Thank you, Keith. So our next panelist, she is known as a world changer, and it's a real pleasure to get the opportunity to meet Livia. She's a current faculty member in UT Austin's Department of Chemistry. She leads research in the use of mass spectrometry to detect cancerous tissues. Her invention, the mass spec pen, holds great promise for improving the effectiveness of surgery performed on cancer patients by drastically reducing the time it takes to detect cancerous tissues and improving accuracy of detection. She is the winner of a MacArthur Fellowship, a Moore Inventor Fellowship, and a South by Southwest Interactive Innovation Award. Livia, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here. I'm relatively still early in my career, so actually in January marks 4 years that I've been at UT Austin. And when I moved to UT from Stanford, two very attractive things for me in Texas were definitely the proximity with the Texas Medical Center in Houston, and the fact that we were building our own medical school at UT Austin, the Dow Medical School. But CPRIT was also something that I had my eyes on. So I was like, well, you know, there's so many research projects that I had in mind as a young faculty member and things that I had proposed for my research program, and funding was really critical to be able to do that in a very productive way and an accelerated way that would really make an impact. So my training is in chemistry. I'm trained as an analytical chemistry and mass spectrometry. So it's a technology that's been very much used in basic research, but not necessarily as a clinical routine method for diagnostics. And my passion has always been, how can we adapt these technologies that we have in the lab? How can we change mass spec technology in a way that we can truly translate to the clinic and put it in the hand of medical professionals, surgeons and pathologists, to be making the best use of these molecular assessments from biological samples. And a lot of the projects that I had in mind were pretty high risk. And some of the things that I'm very appreciative about CPRIT, and now looking back, I've had 3 grants from CPRIT that have really been so important for my research program, is that the grants that CPRIT provide and have provided me really covered a different range of research projects. So projects that were really high risk early on that we weren't even sure if the idea was going to turn out to be anything. There are high risk, high impact research programs that CPRIT provides. And then projects that were really in the translational phase already, I already had proof of principle data that showed, okay, there's promise in this. Then, you know, I received the Early Translation Research Award for that. And then most recently, I received the Individual Investigator Research Award, which was for a project that was much more established, and it was more like a basic research. So it's really special to have an institute like CPRIT that is able to provide researchers, even at an early career stage like me, with research opportunities and research funding that can cover so many different different project types that can really make an impact in clinical research as well as in basic research. And for me, what's been really special too is to be able to provide my students with this kind of training that in chemistry, not necessarily thinking about doing clinical research, translational research, and with CPRIT funding, I've been really able to hire them as research assistants full-time. So now I have 12 students, and most of them, a majority of them have been paid through CPRIT funding, and they've been trained not only with the chemistry and analytical mindset, but with the mindset of doing research that is related to cancer diagnostics and that can really make an impact in clinic. So some of our projects most of our projects have been in collaboration with medical professionals. We collaborate with Dell Medical School, with surgeons, pathologists, radiologists, as well with MD Anderson, Baylor College of Medicine, with the mass spec pen project, which got some attention. The media and with our publications has been really exciting. We have translated one of our systems to the operating room, and now we're doing real-time measurements during surgeries. And the thought that my grad students actually travel to Houston and we stay there, we actually have a contract with a hotel because we're there all the time. And they're actually doing chemical measurements in patients, and getting that information that could have an impact in their treatment option is really special, and it's something that's very transformative. And I don't think we could have done it and achieved these milestones in 4 years if it wasn't for the funding that's been provided to my research program to CPRIT. Also from product development, it's been really exciting with the mass spec pan, but also some of our fine needle aspiration biopsy diagnostics projects to now have generated intellectual property, which my students are also involved with and are inventors. And we have just recently formed our startup and are now pursuing commercialization of these, and hopefully a grant from CPRIT as well for product development. So it's just been a really cool journey so far. I'm really honored to have had funding from CPRIT, and was one of the things that attracted me to Texas, and definitely something that I'm staying for, hopefully, to continue doing the research that I'm passionate about. That's
wonderful. Thank you, Livia. Our next panelist is Dr. Jim Willson. He's the Chief Scientific Officer for CPRIT. He is in charge of supporting innovation in cancer research and recruiting world-class cancer researchers to the institution. He's nationally renowned for his work in the genetics of colorectal cancer, having spent more than 3 decades in the field. Dr. Willson's research led to the development of cell and animal models for human colon cancer that have been key to identifying genetic factors in disease progression. He joined CPRIT in March of 2016, following a distinguished career as a director of Simmons Cancer Center and Associate Dean of Oncology Programs at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Dr. Willson, thank you for joining us. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I, in fact, am pinch hitting for my colleague, Dr. Cindy Walker-Peach, who can't be with us, and delighted to do so and to sit with 2 exceptional CPRIT grantees who already have told you, I think, the major story of CPRIT, and that is how your investment, that is the investment of Texas, can impact on both cancer care, prevention, and discovery, and to catalyze not just the funding that CPRIT's provided these individuals, but how they've actually taken those opportunities and created more than the individual parts. So I think my role here, as now 4 years in the role of Chief Scientific Officer, is to give a bit of an overview of what's going on at CPRIT and to invite thought leaders such as yourselves to help us think about what's ahead. As mentioned, I previously was the director of the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center before coming to CPRIT, and took on a job that was created by Al Gilman and then further enhanced by my immediate predecessor, Dr. Margaret Kripke. And In the past decade, CPRIT has now invested $2.5 billion in peer-reviewed, recommended by non-Texans grants. Those grants have enabled prevention services based on established best practices to now penetrate all 254 Texas counties. Those grants have supported the early development of, with non-dilutive funding, of 34 very promising cancer-related early-stage companies, which as an aggregate have attracted an additional $3.7 billion in private investments. 70% of that $2.5 billion has gone to support the development of the research prowess of our Texas institutions of higher education in supporting over 700 investigator-initiated grants to 24 different Texas institutions, supporting, as I've will develop even further, the recruitment of 199 absolutely stellar cancer investigators from outside of Texas to relocate here to be part of our Texas ecosystem, joining 18 different Texas institutions. And investments that have enabled the development of really high-end technology important in cancer and biomedical research: cryo-electron microscopy, single-cell genomics, proteomics, small molecule and antibody drug discovery, specimen inventories, bioinformatics, and population-based research resources, all important in building the ecosystem for cancer research, but I would argue has had a profound effect as well on the biomedical research capabilities of the state. So with this additional 10 years and additional funds in front of us, it's really the perfect time, as mentioned earlier, for TAMEST and other thought leaders to help CPRIT think about how to maximize these investments going forward. And in considering CPRIT's role in advancing commercialization and innovation, the topic for the panel, I'd like to offer 3 precepts for us to be considering. The first is that increasingly, and I think the preponderance of innovations in cancer prevention care have come from discoveries which have been publicly funded, emphasizing the importance of a robust discovery engine, which means investment in people, facilities, and establishing a critical mass. As mentioned several times during the morning sessions, the transition from discovery to an investable new company is a significant barrier, both here in Texas and elsewhere. And it is indeed an opportunity for CPRIT and Texas to develop more effective ways to bridge this gap. And then finally, think about Texas as one of the nation's largest states and most diverse states, offering us an opportunity to become key partners with industry in providing access to patients, biospecimens for clinical trials, and as well an innovator in implementation of the evidence-based interventions which are going to make a difference in terms of preventing cancer in the future. So with that, let me turn it back over to you, Tom, for the panel.
Well, let's talk about the industry a little bit and where CPRIT fits in. In 1996, when my organization, THBI, opened its doors, we counted 500 companies in the state of Texas. And we found that most of the companies that had been created out of our academic health science centers and out of our research institutions had been formed and were leaving the state, and they were taking their grads with them. Let's fast forward to today, and we can begin to see the impact of CPRIT. But today we have 5,500 companies. Today we have over 225,000 employees. The Bioinnovation organization did a study that they release every 18 months. They did 10 metrics, and they looked at each state and they overlaid those metrics. And within those metrics, Texas scored in the top 6 of the quintiles out of the 10. So I would say today that because of the programs like CPRIT, and because of the other investments the state has made through the governor's TRIP funding, through the GERI program, which is recruiting talent, through the Enterprise Fund, which is investing in projects of which the life sciences has been a huge beneficiary of. And now we have another 10 years of CPRIT, another $300 million a year, another $300 million per year for the next 10 years, after $2.4 billion has already been invested in all three areas. So this is an open question for the panelists. Its effect. What effect in terms of the growth, in what you're seeing, in terms of the colleagues you're talking to, in terms of, Livia, you had said your team's excited to be here. What effect, overall effect, do you think CPRIT has had, and what does it look like moving forward? And I'll just open it up.
I can definitely start. For me, even at this early stage in my career, just seeing how even my students are committed and wanting to stay in Texas to continue doing the type of impactful cancer research that we can do, and that's really something that I think CPRIT plays a major role. And I'll give one example. One of my students, Marta Sens, she was actually my second graduate student. She's defending now in February. She's been funded through CPRIT, and now she's going to MD Anderson with the CPRIT Triumph postdoctoral fellowship. So it's just so cool to see that, you know, as part of her training, she's also been so deeply engaged with the with CPRIT as you know, a funding agency, but also as I'll use the buzzword today, an ecosystem of research and mindset of the type of passionate research that will make an impact for patients. And I think keeping not only the PIs here, but also the next generation of researchers that are passionate with this goal in Texas, and taking full advantage of the financial resources and also the resources from, for example, we heard so well today from Dr. Piesters, right, from MD Anderson to Texas Medical Center, and all of our hospitals can really advance research and discoveries and diagnostics in a very powerful way.
Keith, Jim?
So yes, I think that several points that are really quite apparent to me, both from the standpoint of my role in CPRIT, but also as the director of the UT Southwestern Cancer Center. Without a question, the ability of UT Southwestern to build the cancer program over the past decade can be directly, the line can be directly linked to the CPRIT investments that helped to accelerate it, and was critical in UT Southwestern achieving its recognition as a NCI designated comprehensive cancer center in a very short period of time, again because of priming the pump. But also, UT Southwestern wasn't the only example. It was also true at Baylor College of Medicine. The same acceleration of the opportunities for interdisciplinary care, outreach to the community through the prevention programs, et cetera, accelerated their achievement as a comprehensive cancer center. Why is that important? It's because the NCI Comprehensive Cancer Centers really are the vehicle for institutions to accelerate this translation from discovery to impact on patients at the early stages, because they link, of course, as all of you here are aware, the scientist with clinical patients, et cetera, just as Dr. Eberlin has just so nicely demonstrated in her program. The other aspect that occurs to me as a real highlight is the scholars who have been recruited to Texas through the investment of CPRIT resources. This was a program that was conceived of by Al Gilman, and I think is probably, arguably, the most impactful program to date that CPRIT has invested in. I mentioned 199 investigators, but what's really very exciting about that number is that 2/3 of those individuals represent some of the brightest stars from across the country that have been recruited to Texas at the beginning of their careers. So think about it, thousands of years of research years ahead of them for Texas. And I can tell you as Cancer Center Director, it was the CPRIT resources for those recruitments that enabled their us to be successful in competing with Boston, San Diego, Seattle for their relocating to Texas.
Keith?
I'm going to approach it a little bit differently and share with you that our CPRIT prevention programs over the past 10 years have created an impact such that we've found over 1,000 people in underserved and underinsured communities that have had early stage cancer that we've been able to go in and essentially cure them of that. So let's take one of those hypothetical 1,000 people and say that this is a gentleman in his early 50s who's a laborer who supports his family with minimal or very marginal health insurance, and comes to us for a free colon cancer screening that we then detect the fact that he has a high-grade adenoma, which is a precursor to colorectal cancer, and we're able to provide for him the services in order to be able to remove that adenoma, and he is essentially cured. And continues to work and support his family for the next 10 to 15 years or so, with minimal impact financially to the state. Versus had CPRIT not funded that particular test, then this high-grade adenoma would have gone undetected for a period of more than likely years, to which this laborer would now present to a local emergency room, uninsured, unfunded, in pain, because this high-grade adenoma had not only grown, but it had spread to other parts of the body, causing the pain. And so now we're looking at trying to provide advanced cancer care. The patient is not able to work any longer. The family who's dependent on this one source of income struggles mightily. So there's no question that the talent that is here and the talent that we work with is important. But I want you to see the other side of the coin of CPRIT, that there's also talent in our communities that we are making a true impact through these prevention programs that are impacting not only those thousands, but really tens of thousands that depend on those 1,000 who are oftentimes the breadwinners of the family, and helping conserve state resources because we're not having to fund unfunded care.
And I think one fact that not a lot of people know, but it's hit literally every county in the state of Texas.
All 254 counties.
That is just an amazing record. It is, and the cost savings and the awareness that is building is something else as well. Well, let's switch gears a little bit, because I know we're running out of time, and I would like to have a question or two from the audience. But what's more important to the state? CPRIT is a multifaceted type of a program. Recruits, prevents, invests, and matches grants. So out of those four components, and I know each of you represent, I know that the prevention and the awareness is very big in your portfolio of things that you do, the invention side. But can you speak to that in terms of the elements of CPRIT and its impact on the state as well? What do you think?
Who first?
Who wants to go first?
Well,
Jim?
I guess I would, thinking about the question, I see the opportunities that CPRIT has already realized, but also what's in front of us is actually a integration of all three of those areas. And what I like about the track record to date is the thinking that the agency has had realized through its RFA mechanisms to try to bring these together, to realize that there is an opportunity to link the discovery engine with commercialization. And so programs like our early Translational Research Award that Dr. Eberlin mentioned earlier that catalyzed her translation of her discovery, opportunities to build prevention research and implementation research because of the access that programs like Dr. Argenbright's have provided CPRIT investigators into the community. So I would argue that actually it is, as we go forward, thinking about how to continue to engage all three of these areas because they're all three quite important, but also very much linked together.
Couldn't agree more. You think about what I do and what a lot of us here have experienced in part of our own personal cancer screening, whether that be a mammogram, which is an X-ray, a low-dose CT scan for lung cancer, which is an X-ray, a colonoscopy, which is an invasive all-day type of procedure. I hope I live long enough to see when we look back on these and think, oh my God, what were you guys doing back then? I mean, that's like leeches and bleeding, you know? My call to this group is to say, let's, think about innovation that could take us beyond that to a blood test that would look for a biomarker, that would look for a circulating antibody, that would look for a circulating, particular tumor cell. We're so close to that. I think that there are a lot of labs around the country that have had a lot of promise with this. My call to action is to say, look, CPRIT has the prevention program, CPRIT has the research programs, put those together and let's discover and commercialize a test, a blood test that is drawn at the same time that you get your glucose drawn or your cholesterol drawn on an annual basis, because that I think is a real breakthrough that I think that quite frankly we are uniquely positioned for at CPRIT and in the state of Texas.
Anybody else would like to add? Because we'll go ahead.
No, absolutely. I'll just say one more time that I don't think throughout my 4 years here in Texas there has been one idea or like a research project that I thought, well, there's no funding from CPRIT for this. It's really special to be able to have such a wealth of funding opportunities that are targeted at prevention, at research at various stages of risk, as well as commercialization at different stages of the commercialization process. So I think that's something that is really special about CPRIT that I appreciate very much.
One of the things that I have observed, and we work very closely with members of the Texas legislature. We also work very closely with members of our Texas congressional delegation. And what CPRIT has done is it has created a formula now for the next big thing for the state of Texas, because the formula under CPRIT is working. I think that members of the legislature are now comfortable with taking equity in companies. They're now experiencing a program that is touching all counties in the state of Texas, which is really in their backyards that's affecting their folks that are voting for them. So they have seen the positive results. And so as we close out this panel, my question to you would be, what is the next big thing? If we took the formula, because this is oncology driven, but if we begin to look beyond those borders and we begin to look at areas like diabetes, or we begin to look at some of the prevalent diseases that are affecting Texans, it gives us an opportunity to think about the next big thing. And I'll just open it up. What is the next big thing?
So I think that's a profound question, and it's wonderful to think that CPRIT can be a model both in Texas as well as nationally for state investment. I guess, though, I want to come back to one point that I hope gets communicated today, and that is, while CPRIT has much to be proud of and accomplished, I think when we're thinking about now the next 10 years, we need your help to think about how to actually enhance where we've been. And some of the things that I mentioned earlier are still, from the standpoint of CPRIT's planning, remain questions that you can help us with. That is, how do we actually engage in a more effective way that gap between discovery and investable company? Quite frankly, our Early Translational Research Award, while Dr. Eberlin is a wonderful example of its success, it hasn't hit the level of success that we had hoped in terms of actually being effective. So we need help to fine-tune that. We need help to think about how to actually build the cancer research infrastructure and collaborative actions across areas that are outside of the I-35 corridor and the greater Texas or greater Houston metroplex. West Texas, the Valley are amazing opportunities for areas of the country that are really not yet touched by the CPRIT research and commercialization effort, and I think offer really important opportunities. And there are others, but I just want to mention that as we sort of end up here today.
So it's a call to action, and please call you if you have an idea. All right. Any other comments?
Now, for me, the next big thing is always translation. So getting the technologies from the lab to the patients in the most accelerated way possible, but also with the highest level of quality and technical quality in development. And I think to do that, we need, of course, resources, which CPRIT is here to help, and of course, so many investors here as well, but as well as qualified trained professionals. And I think part of the training that is provided in academic institutions to our students, and I always go back to the students because they're really the most special part of the work in terms of the development of new technology in the academic institution. It's really crucial to not only, because Texas has already so many resources, right, especially in cancer and medicine, it's really having the professionals, the right talent here with the right resources to really make an enormous impact. So getting that translation in the most effective way and in the time frame that we need to help patients, which is right now, is really the next big thing for me.
Keith, you have the last word.
I don't have anything else to add.
Well, before we move to questions, okay, imagine this. If you would do an overlay of the state of Texas, and I know that we all come from different parts of the state, and I know that we have visitors from out of the state, but do an overlay. In every region of the state, we have amazing health science centers that anchor those particular regions. We have wonderful community colleges that are the crown jewels of training grounds for our lab workers. We have dynamic cities that have vibrant life science initiatives with their own characteristics around the state of Texas. So with another 10 years of CPRIT moving forward, you have to imagine that the future just looks so bright. And it's only going to continue to grow, and the momentum is only going to continue to increase. So we're living in a fabulous time in the state of Texas, and at the end of the day, it's the patient. At the end of the day, it's your invention, it's your services, your prevention services, it's Jim's work. At the end of the day, it's the patient and their families that are the true beneficiaries. So thank you all very much. If you'll give me help me thank our panelists.
One question, if anyone has a question for the panel.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the informative session. I'm Bill Henrich from San Antonio. And question for Keith and for Jim, maybe a little directional question. It seems to me that prevention is such an important part of this puzzle, and it turns out it bumps up against behavioral issues all the time. And I'm thinking about, in particular, obesity and how that is a risk factor for cancer, inflammation, and maybe a key to the hepatocellular cancer that growth that we're seeing in Texas. So I know that's a complicated area, but maybe, Keith, you could make a comment about it, because CPRIT collaborating with people like Amelie Ramirez, who's the president of this society, on the obesity issue, especially in Hispanics and African Americans, would be something that would be, I think, an important direction for CPRIT to think about. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and you're right. There's no question that obesity, exercise, lifestyle are risk factors for cancer. One of the things that I'm fortunate enough to do at the Moncrief Cancer Institute is to have additional resources, some CPRIT resources, but other resources as well, to bring those types of prevention programs to the populations that we serve as well. So whenever we are in a community with doing a mammography screening, we'll bring a dietitian for a food demonstration. We'll bring an exercise trainer to show patients how they can exercise at home. So, thank you for bringing that up, because it isn't just about doing the prevention services, but it's also about us understanding and doing our best to deliver the message that not only do you need to get these recommended screenings, you also need to think about doing a lifestyle with both a dietary lifestyle as well as a fitness lifestyle, both of which have proven to reduce your risk of cancer.
And actually, a really quite important point in terms of the intersection of obesity and hepatocellular cancer. Recently, CPRIT embarked on what I'll call an experiment, but was to try to catalyze across the state concerted efforts to focus on the early detection and prevention of hepatocellular cancer. And one of the projects that is now going to be launched out of Houston is a project which actually builds just exactly what you're talking about, Bill, and that's the what has been learned in the diabetes arena in terms of exercise and behavioral modifications, if you will, impacting on insulin and insulin needs, and also the impact of diabetes, to now apply those principles to the areas of obesity associated with hepatocellular cancer. So I think there's a lot to be learned from the behavioral sciences for sure, and there's actually some nice paradigms already being tested.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom, for moderating the panel, and thanks, panelists, for such an amazing, informative panel. I'd now like to...
Thank you.